GM. This is Friday, the 7th of June. Let's look at daily levels. So, we had another big day of inflows, or we'll say big, relatively big for the past few weeks, over 200 million. Lower than the two previous days. Big inflow day on BlackRock, specifically, IBIT. Quite a high outflow on ARK, which is interesting. And it seems ARK's really struggling with their flows. I've seen more outflows from ARK than any of the other big ones, which don't know if that means anything. Like, it might just be shorter term positions that were taken. It's surprising that they would have used ARK, because the expectation for people who are going to be trading through ETFs, right, not buying and holding it, but doing arbitrage or other types of trading, that they might more likely do it through BlackRock or Fidelity. But you never know. Don't need to read too much into it, other than the fact that there are outflows. And outflows on grayscale, but relatively low. So coming in with a positive day. Price then, in relation to that, held up well. We're staying up near the highs. Now, I mentioned this yesterday about the importance of Bitcoin actually breaking out after these flows. So whenever we last had sustained several days of abnormally large flows, it was the top of the market. So it was in March here. The typical flows were 200 to 400, and then there was occasionally a 5 or a 6, right? But then we had this 3-day period where it was 505, over a billion, and then 680. That was 11th, 12th, 13th of March. That is here. That's the 11th, 12th, 13th. That was the top. And the reason why it was the top, just from an ETF perspective, there's obviously many different reasons. But the biggest reason why it was the top for with an ETF was you got a lot of buying, you got huge inflows, and you did not see price follow through. So what a lot of that would have been is arbitraging the basis. So you can buy Bitcoin spot and you can short the perpetual futures, and you can lock in a free, essentially, return. You can see this through funding rates. This is what funding rates indicate. So on the 11th, 12th, 13th of March, you had super high funding rate for Bitcoin. It had already been high as we'd risen up, which is fine as long as price keeps rising. But over here, even at this point, it was still extremely high. And is it going to let you do the measure? No. Here we go. There we go. Annual. And so at this point, if you look on the right, 61% and 70% and 54% on those 3 days. So at that time, on an annual basis, you could get paid 60% to short Bitcoin. That's how much the funding rate was paying you, exclusive of everything else. So if you're able to buy spot or the underlying ETF and you're able to short the futures, you're locking in that 60% return for that period. And that's what big players do with a lot of money. And it's very, very common. Market makers do it frequently. It's their entire job, basically. They provide liquidity and they try to capture spreads like this. And it obviously doesn't last for long. It doesn't last forever. But it was persistent. I mean, it stayed positive all the way until over here, at which point you probably would have closed. That's like over a month. It's 5-6 weeks. Now it drops down and goes, doesn't stay at 60 forever, but it still stays above 10 or 20 for most of this. Bounce back up to 50. Like, in these areas here, you have to just look at it and say, the cost of just holding dollars is, 5% you're going to get if you put it in a money market fund. So in theory, anything above 5%, if you've dollars lying around, anything above 5% is a good deal. And so whenever you see a period of, let's call it February until April, you see a 2-month period where there's going to be above 10% returns, you might take on that trade. And of course, many people do. So the ETF flows have picked back up again, as funding has as well. This time, though, we don't have any of the crazy funding yet. I don't think it'd be super attractive to play the basis here compared to what it had been in the past. Like, we're still at very flat funding rate for Bitcoin relatively. And I think this is more likely to be an actual bullish move. The only thing holding me back, of course, is that it's summer, it's June. We might not see enough interest to break any of these markets out and hold. But I do think Bitcoin's going to go for a breakout. And I do think it's going to hit at least this 72. That's probably going to get hit today. And I'm going to cover that in trade of the day. So we've got the non-farm payrolls, the employment data, the unemployment rate, pieces of data coming out. And otherwise, after that point, that's the last place it can reject from before all-time high. And of course, then if we do go to all-time high, you're looking at, does it break out? Right? Several different things need to happen. We can go to 72 easily and still not be considered, bullish by that metric, because you can very easily just touch 72, grab the stops, that's it, down we go, back down to 65, whatever, and it just remains as a wide range. So what really needs to happen is breakout and continuation, where Bitcoin starts to trend towards 80k. That's where you're starting to see, okay, this is actually now a new leg of the bull. And so we'll see how that goes. I'll cover more of that in trade of the day regarding today's actual opportunities. Ethereum, still sideways. EPTC, still weak. Nobody gives a shit about Ethereum. What a shock. Even with the ETF narrative, it still can't outperform Bitcoin. Obviously, since the rumor, it's pumped up, but yeah, I bet people are sweating on their ETH positions now. Is it going to be the same thing again? Is ETH really going to cuck everybody again? I find it funny because, I'm a Bitcoin maxi at heart. But I still do think it'll be slow, but I still do think that ETH BTC has most likely bottomed here. I don't see any reason to change that opinion yet. And also, it's not the worst setup in the world, because this weakness in ETH BTC over the past few days has been coming when Bitcoin has been strong. So if Bitcoin was weak, if everything was going down and ETH was going down more, that would be more of a concern. But it's, there's no mistaking the fact that Ethereum is definitely weaker than Bitcoin on the low time frames. But on the higher time frame, I think this whole area here for ETH is likely to just be the most simple outcome, which is a consolidation before a breakout. And it does go for a breakout above 4,200. In there, though, quite often you can see some whipsaw both sides before that. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little move up, move down. But my eyes are more on Bitcoin at the moment, to be honest. And I think that BTC is going to go first. It's going to give the first attempt. So that's where I would rather keep the focus. And this will be covered more on trade of the day in terms of the trades itself, but what to watch out for today. Today is a big day, at least potentially a big day. After yesterday, we got the ECB did lower rates, which is a big move. And now today we have non-farm payroll at 12:30 UTC and unemployment rate. Two big numbers. If you remember last month, what happened? This happened the Friday at the beginning of the month over here. Doesn't actually look like much on ETH because it was such a shit coin. Bitcoin though, that move. This is what we had last time when the employment data came out. I do not see us having the same type of move today off that, because there's so much more expectation now. There's a lot more expectation of the market being bullish, so I don't expect that to come and pull through right away. But I do think the market is set up well. And I think Bitcoin, there's certainly not as much disbelief as there was back then. And now it's like the market needs weak job data so that the Fed can really get that excuse to cut rates. And if they do, should be all good. So that's it. GM. I'm traveling today and I'm flying, and I don't know, timings are super awkward. So the live stream, well, of course it will happen. It might be really, really late, or it might be before my flight, but I'll let you know as soon as possible. GM.